The last guest.
How cool is that? That's fun.
Writes the first question.
Okay.
It's a mystery to both of us.
All right. Who was your last guest?
I'm not telling you.
Okay. I know this guy. And I probably know so. Anyway. In your darkest hour, did you feel safe to tell anyone? And if you had this opportunity now, do you think it would have changed you? Okay. Are we recording, by the way?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, hey. That was me reading without my glasses, so that's pretty good, I feel like. In my darkest hour, there was no one to tell. I was alone and not alone. I was deep in the throes of elevated states of consciousness through the assistance of Ibogaine, which is a really powerful psychedelic medicine. They call it the grandfather. And it was me experiencing all that I am from the perspective of the darkest parts of me. And I didn't know that this place existed within me. I knew there were things within me that I'd prefer not to see, that I'd prefer not to experience, that I prefer not to remember, prefer not to pay attention to. But I didn't know how big that was. And if you've ever seen those videos of, maybe they start in Los Angeles and they zoom out and then you're in the earth, and then they zoom out and then they show some of the bigger planets compared to the earth, and then the earth just turns into this little pinpoint. It just gets bigger and bigger, and then the sun, and then the bigger stars and the galaxies and all this. As expansive as that experience is in depicting some semblance of how big the universe is, it's how deep we are inside, and maybe bigger than that. And I was in the deepest parts of myself and just seeing, it wasn't seeing, it was experiencing everything that I was resisting. And I didn't know this at the time. It was showing me all the mistakes I made and all the things that I was ashamed of. It was showing me that I was not what I wanted the world to see. It wasn't that I wasn't who I would just be if I just worked a little bit harder, and about 5 months from now, I would be this. It was like, no, this is. And so it was all this shortcoming. And the idea, for example, of being a SEAL, I'm watching these movies like Jason Bourne movies and things, and these guys never make mistakes. And I interpreted that as that's what SEALs are like too. And so that's what I'm going to be someday. And so when I was acting as this SEAL and I was making a mistake, like not parallel parking my car properly the first time, those things really shook me. It's like, what, a Navy SEAL wouldn't do this. What are you doing? Anyway, it showed me those things, and then it went deeper into this ancestral thing where there's something that's called cellular memory, where as far as science can tell, we are the sum of at least 7 generations deep of people who contributed to us being here. Grandfathers and grandmothers and great-great-grandmothers, like some of their DNA is within me. And it helps shape my perspective and the way I navigate life and all those things. And there are some people who believe that everyone who has ever contributed to us being as we are is somewhere in our DNA. So coming face to face with some of those things that weren't even mine, that didn't even occur in my lifetime, yet I was carrying. Jesus. So no, I had no one to talk to in that moment. And the thing about being in these elevated states of consciousness, the time is it's not the same as it is in a normal waking state. Like, oh no, I got like 10 more hours of this, will be good. It just seems like it's forever. And then when I came out, I didn't even know really what to say. And my coach asked, "Hey, how'd it go?" And I was like, and I said, "I saw what I'm up against, and it's a mountain." And I just collapsed in her arms and I started crying, because it was just unfathomable how anyone could actually happily or successfully navigate through life knowing that there was something of this magnitude within me. And that's changed over time. That was just, the cold shock of getting in the cold plunge, and 5 minutes later, like, okay, we're hanging, but yeah, that was for sure my darkest moment. There's no combat, no almost dying in training, all that stuff was child's play compared to being face to face with my deepest, darkest.
One of the things that's come up in talking to a lot of the guests on this podcast is, unfortunately, many veterans and first responders bring a lot of trauma with them to these careers. Mm-hmm. And then we just pack more on through these careers. When you got to that moment where you realized that you needed to get help, and I'll call the Ibogaine treatment help, was it already aware to you, or even before you even got to that point, were you bringing, or did you bring trauma with you into this career, or is it all a result of the trauma experienced through doing this career that you're aware of?
Yeah, well, it's a good caveat to that. I'm aware of so I'm also an integration coach for many of us. So I've coached maybe 400 veterans going through their own process of, and I've never met anybody who didn't bring this trauma into anything. The significant thing I think about veterans and first responders is I think it takes a type of person to even apply to that job. And I think what contributes to the idea of that type of person is unresolved trauma. I don't know for sure, but I have it in my mind that people who are in balance, which are very few, it's hardly anybody, who are in balance and deeply connected with the cellular level of who they are, there's no need for any of that. There's no need for, strapping on body armor and just getting after it. So yes, there were things that I brought to the table that I just thought, and they are really just a normal part of us growing up, especially in our culture. But I just had no idea how impactful all of that stuff was in my state of being. There was an interesting study that was done. They were trying to figure out, why is it, especially like in these small units, why is it that 16 guys can go out on an operation, all of them experience the same thing, and 3 of them come back with severe PTS, and the rest of them, they're fine somehow? What is that? And what they found was that the ones who received the incident most severely, that ended up with PTS, they were the ones who weren't loved the way they wanted to be loved as children, more often than not. And when I very first read this study, and this was probably 15 years ago, it didn't make any sense to me. Because to me, I thought, well, if they weren't loved the way they wanted to be, that must mean that they have built like this level of resilience, and they've had to fight and build these muscles and all this stuff, so they would be more powerful, I thought. But really what it is we just develop these coping mechanisms that have nothing to do with actual resilience. on the outside, it looks like we're totally resilient people, but on the inside, it's just like there's any, and I'm talking about the inside that I never even knew until I got to elevated states of consciousness, that it's anything but resolved. It's just alive and bustling with conflict. And is where addiction comes from, abuse or not stepping into your power, so you get abused, and all of this stuff is just boiling up. So I never met anybody who had PTS from like a single instance, and they came into that instant in a place of balance. I've never met anybody like that.
Where I think you hit the nail on the head is for those of us who come from and it obviously is varied through every person, but I do honestly believe that the greater majority of us who come to these professions didn't come from a picture perfect, leave it to beaver background. Mm-hmm. There's some level of, in hindsight, you could look back and pinpoint certain things. Okay. But what was interesting in the way you said it is, I do honestly believe that people who are in that state of trauma and they develop that, what we call as resilience, but I think it's just building those walls up to make the world think that everything's normal. I'll use the duck analogy. On the surface, they look 100% squared away. Below the surface, their feet are going 200 miles an hour. I would use the analogy, though, that though they make themselves look squared away, they are the ones that are on that damn tightrope. Mm-hmm. And it literally is just a wind blow is going to knock them off.
Yeah, fragile.
And so I wonder, in that study, those who showed signs of impact from coming back from a mission, was that literally just the final, the one last rock in that bucket that caused it to overflow? Or was it a buildup over time? And maybe they were starting to experience it more. And when they finally were part of that study, it was just that last mission. And I'm just being rhetorical in my thought process there.
It has to be a buildup. It can't be anything else. So maybe they got their last rock 5 missions before that one, You never know. Everyone's different. They're on their own path, all of that. But it has to be accumulation, because we are so resilient as human beings. And if you go... But I don't even think it's the purpose. For example, I don't think that anything happened that was wrong or that wasn't supposed to. I think that is part of the human growth process. Maybe why we are even alive at all is to experience these things so that we can learn from a deeper perspective of who we actually are, who we really, really are. Because when you deeply know, or at least come into connection with the idea of who you actually are, many of these things can't hurt you. It's just being disconnected from who we are. I think that is such a huge point of why human beings suffer. And I think some of these happen so that we can learn to return to who we actually are, if we choose to go down that path. And we don't have to. I know plenty of people who never do. And it just is.
Let's take you back to the beginning then. Where's your hometown? Where'd you grow up?
I was born in England. My dad was stationed there when he was in the Air Force. And then I moved to about an hour north of San Francisco when I was 3. And I grew up there in a town called Fairfield. And
did the military bring your family back to the States?
Yes. So my dad was stationed at Travis Air Force Base, which is right there. And that's where I grew up. And got my deep integration with, my life's problems starting really, really then. I actually, believe it or not, I actually have a lot of memories from growing up in England. But really cutting my teeth in terms of the trajectory of the path of my life really started to formulate itself when I was a little kid there. And, parents got divorced, and what the household was like, my 8-year-old brother having to take full responsibility of a brother he didn't even want, that took all the attention away from him, and all of that perfect chaos. And my dad trying to juggle everything that he wasn't capable of, because he's just an iron wall too. Like nothing was going to bother this guy. He was responsible for the lives of 2 little boys, and nothing was going to break him. And so all of the stuff that just comes with that. And then after I graduated high school, the year before that, I learned about the idea of SEALs. So I wanted to become a SEAL. I took the ASVAB. I thought I passed it. And when I went into boot camp, they told me, you failed it. And I was like, damn it, I didn't know that. So I had to go to the regular Navy for 2 years while I retook classes and things.
I heard somebody recently say this. Did you fail the ASVAB or just not score high enough to get the SEAL contract?
That's correct.
Okay.
I didn't fail it. So what I knew about from my recruiters was that there was an overall score that you get in the ASVAB, that I had to score above that to get in the training. And I did. What I didn't know was that I needed to also score certain levels within each one of the components of the ASVAB. And so, for example, mechanical comprehension, you needed to score a 50, and I scored a 48. And at boot camp, that's the first time I heard that I needed a 50. And I was like, ugh. And I was, 18, and I thought my whole life was over, that I would never amount to anything. I'd be homeless and all this stuff,
What year did you graduate high school?
92. Yeah. So, and then I went into the Navy just a couple of months or a couple of weeks after I turned 18. And then,
did you do the delayed entry?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What was Dad's opinion as far as you joining the military?
So being in the Air Force, first I wanted to be a Marine before I knew about the teams. And yeah, my dad just wasn't that type of guy. He was really, of all the struggles we had, he always loved me. That was for sure. He was very afraid that I would die. And I'm like, what else would I want to do? Just this 18-year-old. Yeah, if I'm going to die, I want to die as, on the SEAL teams. Are you kidding me? That's the glorious, the movies and all that. So he supported me, and he was also very deeply concerned about me because, he saw me as a little boy still, and all the mistakes that I make and all this. He's just, how's this guy going to even survive past the first 6 months? I just did all the dumbest shit you can imagine. So
I'm guessing you weren't the most squared away 18-year-old.
No, not at all, man. I had probably the maturity level of a 12-year-old, and I'm not kidding. I
think that's being generous for most 18-year-old boys.
Man, yeah, you're probably right. I was probably 3, but with the driver's license. And back then in the military, you could drink when you were 18. They had the bars and stuff on base and everything. Yeah, I had no business doing a lot of things, but I did it anyway. And, yeah, so yeah, after boot camp, I went to hospital corps school. So basically the medic school for the Navy. And then I went to work at a hospital while I was waiting to get all my stuff squared away to go to SEAL training. I finally made it to SEAL training, and 4 months later, they threw me out because I failed every single time run we had. And I failed every time run we had because I had the maturity level of a 3-year-old, and I didn't properly prepare myself. So I wasn't conditioned well enough. My bones weren't conditioned enough. I broke both of my legs. And
how were you athletically prior to going in? Did you play sports as a kid?
Yeah, I played wide receiver. I didn't play any baseball or anything, but football was more my thing. And I had some agility. I had the best hands that I knew of every single team I was on. So I had that kind of thing, and I knew what it was like to practice hard. But, obviously SEAL training was a different thing. And one of the things my dad said to me at the dinner table when I told him I would be a SEAL, he's like, do you know what those guys are going to say to you? You're like the instructors. He's like, well, what do you think's the worst thing they could say to you? I said, that I'm not an Ugalde, like my last name. He's like, they're going to say way worse stuff. And the reason why he was saying that is because I did not have thick skin. My brother could just look at me the wrong way. He could wreck my whole day. Because I was the little brother while all this storm was going on in the house. So I had no dog to kick. And thank God I didn't. Thank God I didn't have any younger siblings, because I would have beat the shit out of them, because that's how we did stuff. And so, people respond in many different ways. Some get thicker skin, and I did not. I was absolutely free. You looked at me the wrong way. You said something, and it hit me hard. Like I'm this huge failure. I'm never going to amount to anything, all this stuff. And so my dad knew that. He's like, where do you think what neighborhood do you think you're walking into going? I'm like, I'll be fine. And so that's what SEAL training was for me for 4 months, of just these guys doing everything they could to get me to quit. And they were saying all the things, because I was failing all the time runs. They knew I didn't belong there, and I wasn't quitting. So they did everything they could. So, I heard a lot of that stuff. I internalized a lot of that. And for all I know, that's why, who knows, the body keeps a score kind of thing. So
taking it back to your football days, when you did know that, hey, I'm going into the Navy and my plan is to become a Navy SEAL, that didn't cause you to kind of go the opposite way and go, I need to ramp my training up to the nth degree and get as in shape as possible? Or was it a thought of, I'm in good enough shape?
Both. I didn't know how to swim well, so I asked to join the water polo team so I could learn how to swim. And the coach I told him what I was trying to do. He said, you don't need to learn how to play water polo. You just, while we're practicing over here, you just swim laps over there. And if I see you doing anything stupid, I'll help you correct some things here and there. Other than that, and I literally couldn't even swim all the way across the 25 meters without standing up. It surprised me, because I was in football shape. This is not a big deal, but swimming muscles are very, very different. But I realized that I had a lot of work to do, but it didn't matter. And I think 6 months later, I swam 5 miles in a pool. And I had black eyes even from my goggles and things like that. It was a huge thing. And so there I thought I was fine, and fine enough across the board is how I felt. I'm good. And
reality hit you quickly.
It hit me instantaneously. I showed up on a day to SEAL training. They said, this is an interesting time. You can either class up with the class on Monday and go and start training, or what we highly recommend is you hang out. That class is going to start and go on, and you're just going to be sort of in purgatory, really. And people are going to start slowly piling in. And then when there's enough of you, we're going to start training that doesn't really count. And then when we get enough on this particular date, then you're actually going to start. So I took their recommendation and I did that. And the first day we worked out, the first thing they did is they took us into the soft sand. So we're in soft sanded boots and pants and that. And we started doing these berm sprints. There was these huge, like 15-foot sand berms between the ocean and the compound. And it's just all soft sand. So when you're running up, your feet are sinking in and that kind of thing. So we were doing sprints up and down, just over and over and over again. And I was doing really good. And I'm, sort of in the middle of the pack and everything. And I'm like, yeah, I'm here. I finally made it, because it took me 2 years to get there, of failing and having to retake tests and all of this stuff. And then we were done with the berm sprints. And then we went on a 4-mile conditioning run. And almost immediately I was 300 feet behind everybody. And this is minute 15 of training. And I'm like,
and this is just the pre-training. This is just
not even, we hadn't even started yet. As far as they're concerned, I'm not even in a class yet. I'm not even officially there. And So I'm instantly 300 feet behind everyone, and they have this ambulance that follows their runs, and they have this megaphone that there's, "What are you doing back here? We just started the run. Get up there." And I remember I was like, "I put out too hard on the beach, on the sandburn sprints." And they're like, "Oh my God, this is, another one of these guys that we have to deal with." And I never, for the next 4 months, I never caught up. Those guys just continued to get faster and stronger. I was continuing to get faster and stronger, but I was just behind. But slowly my legs were, "What are you doing to us, bro?" Like, what is going on here? And it got to the point I was taking like 2,400 milligrams of Motrin every day. As a medic, I knew that was not good for me. So I wouldn't take Motrin on the weekends. I literally couldn't even walk up or down stairs. It was brutal, and they were all swollen and bruised and everything. And again, getting into this lack of maturity thing, I was just on cruise control. I'm here. I'm just going to keep going. I never once thought, it's probably actually smarter if I, ring the bell, go out, rehab, recondition myself, and come back stronger. But I never thought that. I'm here. We're just going. And
going back to the way they teach things, and this is something I've never asked. I've talked to several who have been rolled for medical reasons, but like you, they refused to give up until it was, "Hey, we're basically pulling you out of here because we know it's better for you." But they didn't ring the bell. But do they tell you if you ring the bell, that wipes any chance of ever being able to do it again?
I think there was a time, and it might have been, I think there was a time that was true, but it's not always true. It's not true today. I know many people in the SEAL teams who have quit, who have come back. I can't remember whether or not that was actually true when I was there. But I didn't want to quit. I didn't belong there. Yeah, I wasn't performing, but I didn't want to leave,
I'm not a quitter.
Well, maybe that was the thought. It could have been the thought. But, I was in the arena, man. Like I was in buds, dude. This is a big deal. I'm here. Where else do I want to go? You know what I mean? And yeah, I was getting my teeth kicked in every day and all that stuff. Not the healthiest decisions, that's for sure.
You had mentioned that you got better at your swimming, swimming up to 5 miles, obviously all pool time. Boy, how your brains didn't go to scrambled eggs, I don't know. Because I remember my time doing triathlons and doing long swims at a pool. But were you not doing long runs in conjunction with the long swimming?
Oh, I didn't like running.
Again, the logic and maturity of an 18-year-old.
100%. That's what I'm saying. It's like, that didn't dawn on you that you were going to have to. I did a couple of, you know what? That's not true. I did a lot of long runs. That's not true at all. It's been a while since I've thought about this. I was doing 8-mile runs. I would wake up at 2:00 in the morning for no reason and say, "Oh, well, I'm going to go for a run." And I would run 8 miles, but it would be in tennis shoes on the street. And I also remember there was a time, because I worked at Oakland Naval Hospital, which doesn't exist anymore, but I would get off early in the morning from my, graveyard shift, and I would drive to San Francisco, and I would go to Ocean Beach, and you can run forever there. And I did run forever, all the time. And I think there was a couple of things. One, pretty sure I was running on hard packed sand, for one. Two, I was doing it on my own terms. I have no idea how fast I was running, but I don't think that it was bad at all. But what happened was I met a girl, and it was like the first time in my life I was kind of being taken care of, sort of thing, in that way. And I stopped training. And people were, "What are you doing, man? Are you getting ready?" I'm like, "They're not going to make me quit. I'm good, man. I've done enough. I've done a lot, You don't know how much training I've done. I'm good." And I let off the gas big time, like probably 8 months before I went to training. And So yeah, when I showed up, I do remember doing one soft sand run, and it was almost like swimming for the first time. Like, ooh, I don't have these muscles. That's how I felt running in the soft sand, and I didn't do it again until I went to Bud's maybe 8 months later after that. So I was not, even in my highest condition, I wasn't conditioned to run in the soft sand. But there are plenty of people who don't, they work on a ship before they go to Bud's. So it's, the bottom line is I just didn't prepare well enough, and that was it. Yeah.
Going back to going into the Navy, what drew you down the medical route?
My favorite movie in high school was Pretty Woman. And because when I saw...
That's what every Navy SEAL says was their favorite movie in high school.
Everyone says the same. I'm joking, yeah. Richard Gere's character was so loaded with money. I'm like, what is that? What do I got to do to get that kind of money? But I sucked hard in school. It was a bad. It wasn't okay. My experience in school was not all right. And that combined with how I grew up, my body started already failing and started breaking in some points. And it would manifest sometimes in just random, like, kitchen faucet nosebleeds out of nowhere. I would just be sitting there. All of a sudden, my nose would just start gushing blood. So I would go to the nurse's office all the time, and she was an amazing human being. And because, I saw her once a month or something, we became friends. And so when I'd get these report cards with all these D's and a couple F's and things, I would come to her in a panic. I'm like, how am I going to tell my dad? Because I knew what was coming, and I was incapable of doing anything about it so that I didn't get those report cards. But she then again sat down with me and helped me figure out a plan of how I was going to break this news to my dad. And then she finally, after, whatever, our 10th conversation like this, she said, what do you think you want to do in life? And I said, I think I want to be a doctor. And she goes, dude, you hate school, bro. It takes doctors like 10 years of school after high school, man. And she's like, do you know what a paramedic is? And I said, mm-mm. She's like, they're like doctors, but instead of going to school for 10 years, they go to school for 10 months. And then they save people's lives out on the street, and then they drop them off at the doctors. I said, well, that sounds like the most amazing thing. But the whole Pretty Woman thing is,
I want all the money.
What if I start my own ambulance company? And so I started doing ride-alongs, and I had a whole plan. I knew how I was going to start my own ambulance company. I knew all the things, and I was on cruise control.
You've got a lot of coffee options out there. You've got a lot of veteran and first responder owned coffee companies as well. Trident Coffee is one of these companies, but they're different. Trident fuels your body and mind with a premium cold brew that's infused with powerful ingredients for performance, focus, and wellness. Made with organic MCT oil, lion's mane, and reishi mushrooms, this isn't just coffee. It's fuel for your brain, ensuring smooth, steady energy with no jitters and no crashes. Plus, the cocoa powder adds antioxidants, and the electrolytes keep you hydrated and balanced. Yes, they are cold brew experts, and their beans are brewed for cold brew optimization. But what does that mean for those of you who also love hot coffee like me? Their coffee tastes amazing, not bitter. So enjoy it hot or iced, mixed into your protein shake, or take it on the go. However you drink it, Trident Coffee is coffee upgraded. Get yours now at tridentcoffee.com and use the promo code TDP15 for 15% off your order. That's TDP15 for 15% off your order. Stay sharp, stay fueled, stay ready.
One day, and mostly because I've always had this powerfully compassionate heart in me, almost like wildly compassionate. Like if you're cruel to somebody and I see it, I would really respond in not a sane way, nothing terrible. I wasn't like this horrible kid or anything, but I always was in some kind of trouble, but I just didn't know how to handle seeing injustice. And so I have a big cord of protector in me. Like that exists even today. So yeah, medicine was always a thing. The potential of being in a place to save somebody's life back then, was a really big deal to me. And then one day I was watching the movie Navy SEALs, and I'm just freaking out about what these guys are doing, jumping out of planes, driving cars fast, going after bad guys, shooting guns. And I'm like, what is this? And about halfway through the movie, I realized they had a paramedic on their team, and I'm like, that's it. This is my whole life. This is what I'm going to do. So, yeah.
When you got to A school, how did you adapt to that? How did that learning process come for you? And did you find that you thrived in that environment because it was something you really wanted to do?
No. I scraped by academically I did really well with the practical things, like putting people on backboards and all the medicine, giving shots and all. I did really, really well. But all the academic stuff I was studying as hard as I could. And we would have studying groups, and there were people who didn't have to study at all. They would just be hanging out and drinking beers, and they would be getting A's. And then there were a group of people who studied hard, who did well. And then there was me and a couple of guys where we were just shaking every test day because we didn't know if we were going to get rolled or dropped from the program and all. It was always hard. Now, that wasn't my experience. That was my experience in A school right after boot camp. When I'll go way forward real quick. I went to Special Operations Combat Medic School in Fort Bragg 10 years later. That's one of the most difficult academic schools in the military. And I did really, really well because that was, well, one, by that time I was a civilian paramedic for like 5 years, but then it was whatever problems that were, just confining my mind and my ability to absorb and all that stuff had been loosened a little bit by the time I went back to that school. But yeah.
So you made it to Buds the first time, classed up with which class?
199.
And how far into it did you get before the injuries just got too much?
So I was in training for 4 months. I think I might have been in 199 for maybe a month and a half or 2 months, which doesn't sound like much, but that's a long time to be in class. And so they dropped me Friday before Hell Week. And I didn't see it coming, part of that, immaturity thing. And that was a really interesting thing too, because everyone knows about Hell Week and everybody knows about this thing is called pull count that happens in second phase diving, where they do all this stuff to you. But that's all I really knew. But they have some seriously hard evolutions that I've come to now know since were some of the hardest things we did. And one of them was called a beehive. And on this particular day, I just remember them saying that this was the biggest storm that hit Coronado in 100 years. Trees were being uprooted. All this stuff was like landing on cars, and it was huge rains, driving winds, and it was probably 50 degrees outside. And we had to go to the pool, and there were still probably almost 200 of us in the class, and they threw us all in the pool with boots and pants and T-shirts on, and then we had our masks on, and we had to fill our masks up with water and tread water with our hands up while our masks were full with water, and they just kept pushing us in closer together in this big, massive, that's why they call it a beehive. It's just like that, and people are choking, and we're kicking each other. We don't mean to, but we're just like kicking each other and all this. And people were getting out 10 at a time, quitting. I mean, while all this weather is driving and everything, and anytime an instructor saw that the water level in your eye, in your goggles was coming down your eyeglass, they would pull you out and just beat you, and then you'd have to fill your water back up and go back into the pool again. And it was a lot of chaos. And it ended. And they pull us out on the pool, and they have us sitting down, and the ones that were left in class, there was probably 100 of us at that time, maybe. They said it was the first time that entire time with the pre-training and then first phase, where an instructor was even mildly cool to us. And the wind and rain are still driving, and he's standing there in his, his raincoat, which isn't doing him any good at this point. And he's like, just got to tell you guys, we're about to start Hell Week next week, and there is nothing in Hell Week that exists that's worse than what you guys just did. If you can do what you just did for 5.5 days, you're gonna make it through. It's not. This is all we got for you. We couldn't do anything worse to you if we wanted to, kind of thing. And when we heard that, I mean, I'm telling you, probably the first positive anything any instructor said to us that whole entire time. We went from there to eat dinner, and I just remember all of our chests were, we're going to be Navy SEALs, dude. It was just, we were so amped on ourselves and what we were able to survive. And we sit down to eat, and I get a tap on my shoulder, and it's my class officer, and he's like, hey man, there's something that's called a Hell Week board. And if you failed anything, underwater knot tying, the obstacle course, swims or runs or anything, you got to go in front of them, and they're going to decide whether or not they're going to keep you. And my heart just sunk because I failed every single time run we had. I passed everything else, but not the time runs. And the way that it started, everyone hated me. The instructors hated me. The guys in the class were like, what are you even doing here? Why'd you even show up? But I had been through so much, and there had been probably at this time, like 200 people who have quit before me, and some of them were Olympic athletes. I started to win. I had all the class. The class was like, I don't know how the hell you get up every day. You're welcome here. And I even started to win over some of the instructors. They would pull me aside and just be like, dude, just keep going, So the class officer who tapped me on the shoulder said, if there's anybody who's safe in the class, it's you. There's no way they're going to drop you after all this. I was just too afraid. And the next day came, the rest of the class started prepping all the boats and the life jackets and helmets and things for Hell Week to start and all this. It's like, here it comes, this is awesome. The rest of us, there was probably 16 of us that had to go through these Hell Week boards for failing various things. One by one, they would call us up, and some guys would come back happy and some guys would come back crying. And finally it was my turn to go up, and I walked in the office, and there's a panel of SEAL instructors there. One's got my file on there, and he's looking at it and closes it. You failed every single time run you've had since you've been here. You don't belong here. You got to go. And I was just, I couldn't believe it, even though it was the only option. I just couldn't believe it, man. And so then I had to out process, and I had to go through the medical screening, and the doctor said, if you would have went to Hell Week and ran till Wednesday, your legs would have broken in a way that you would never be able to walk normally again. The best thing in the world that could have happened is you getting dropped. Now you're in trouble now. You gotta get your legs taken care of now.
At this point, is it just all stress fractures?
There was true fractures at this point. It was beyond stress fractures.
And where about?
Which in both of my tibias. I don't think I had any of my fibulas, but it's been a while.
Right.
But so I healed up, and then it's the military, so I still have time on my contract. So I ended up becoming a corpsman with the Marines for a while, and I went to 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, and 1st Combat Engineer Battalion. And then I went to Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton, and I ended up finishing out my contract there. And they asked me if I wanted to re-enlist, and I joined to be a SEAL. I'm not a SEAL. I'm getting out. So then I went to bartender school.
So in the remainder of that contract, your mindset was, hey, I had my shot. There's no way I can go back. Was there anybody in your corner going, hey, just get healthy again and resubmit a chance to go?
There was a SEAL instructor. He was the officer for first phase, and he had some kind of conversation with me. I remember him saying something about it. Whatever it is you're doing is not common. Just get stronger and come back, and it just seems so
foreign.
Yeah. And unimaginable that I would somehow end up doing what it took to get that strong and get that fast beyond, and heal and all the things, and then come back. It just, I don't know. It seemed so far away, almost unimaginable and then plus he's telling me this minutes after the carpet I thought I was going to Hell Week. You know what I mean? And I had the mindset, as you imagine the mindset that somebody has to have when they're about to go through Hell Week. I mean, I was still there. And then also at the same time being like, you're not going anywhere sort of thing. So it was so crazy, unimaginable. So
you get out in
97.
Go to bartender school.
Yeah.
Not paramedic school, or not start your paramedic business. Yeah,
no. I had changed a little bit. I think I even wanted to be I did want to be a captain on a cruise ship. And so they have schools for that. And there's the Mass Maritime Academy. There's a California Maritime Academy. I was thinking about doing that.
Did you stay in the San Diego area?
For a little bit. And then I moved to Boston. My wife at the time, she grew up there and she had been in California with me for a long time. So we went there to be with her family. And then I went to paramedic school. Or I went to EMT school, and then I went to paramedic school, and then I started working on the trucks from there, and I loved it. It was one of the greatest jobs I ever had. I even had dreams about what my day was going to be like the following day. Like I was getting these premonition dreams. Like I would be on calls and be like, yep, I dreamed that this was going to happen, so I knew what to do. It was crazy. I was totally in alignment with everything being a paramedic. I was happy as could be.
Was it a private company or was it Boston Fire?
It was American Medical Response. And so I worked all over the state. I worked per diem. So I had different partners every day, different stations every day, but I did it and I would work like 70 hours a week sometimes, 100-hour weeks sometimes. And so I knew everybody in the whole area. I worked at every station in the whole area, and it was the best. Yeah, totally loved it.
We're going to eventually get there because you did eventually become a SEAL. But at that point in your headspace, are you thinking about trying to go back? Is it that little itch that's always back there that needs to be scratched? Or was there a point where you just flat out weren't thinking about it?
From the day that I got dropped, for the next 8 years, I had a minimum of 3 really shitty dreams a month about not making it through. They weren't nightmares. There were moments being yelled at on the beach or something like that, but it wasn't nightmarish. It was just these really negative connotation things for 8 years. And finally, one day I woke up, I said, the only way these dreams are going to end is if I go back. And so I was a paramedic in Massachusetts for a while. Then we moved to Florida. I was a paramedic there, and that's when I had that dream. And so I had to lose 70 pounds. I was 28 at the time. The cutoff is 29. We had already planned to move to Hawaii, so we did. So I was working in Hawaii as a paramedic, but while I was training. And so I got back into shape, like Bud's level shape. And this was really interesting because I knew what it was like. And I was even doing some really stupid things. Like there's a place called Ala Moana Park in Oahu where they have, those public park workout stations, elevated benches where you can do sit-ups and things, where I would time my workouts at a certain time. It was like 2 a.m. where the sprinklers would go. And I would just be doing sit-ups by getting hammered by sprinklers and stuff. Oh God, I would never do that now. But I was so mindset, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to either do it or I'm not going to do it. And I learned my lesson about the soft sand run. So I was running in the soft sand all up and down Oahu. And yeah, I was totally 100% on a mission. And I didn't understand many things, but one of the things I didn't understand at the time, I had no awareness whatsoever about ego. So all of this was rooted in shame, all of it. Every single push-up I did, every single step I took running, everything I did was, you're not good enough. You're you're going to be worthless if you don't make it through this time. That was the whole entire root system of what I was doing while I was doing it. Crazy, but it was just, it was what I needed at the time, I suppose.
Was your family and your wife supportive of this second go through?
Yeah. And I gave her all the space and all the room, because we were living the best life. We had everything. We both had really good paying jobs. American Medical Response, I could work all over the country. I just had to take licensing things. And she was a travel nurse anyway. I mean, we had everything we needed. And I said, hey, I want to do this. Is this cool? And she took her like a week. And she said, yeah, but the only reason she said yeah is because she didn't want me to resent her, which I would have, especially at that time, without understanding a lot of things. So she sacrificed a lot, man. But yeah, so the decision was made to go. And then when I was ready, still in Hawaii, I called the San Diego recruiter. I told him what I was doing, and, that was it.
Ended up back in the Navy what year?
I think it was 2002. 2002 or 3. I think it was 2002. But I also learned my lesson, because I was 20 years old the first time I went. I got injured. I was 29 this time. Who knows? My legs still hadn't recovered really 100%. So
how was running feeling to you at this point?
It hurt. Yeah, it hurt. And I remember one day I was just doing a normal walk up to Diamond Head, which is a really cool hike up there. It's not strenuous. It's not very much, but it was like my day off from training. So I walked up to the top of Diamond Head, and as I was walking back, both of my shins I felt like there was a strap or something there that snapped, and I had, I wouldn't say an emotional breakdown, but I sat in my car, and there were tears. I wasn't sobbing, but it was just like, damn, I'm not even going to be able to go back, even if I want to. I just walked up to Diamond Head. I'm about to go put my body through 8 months of, soft sand runs and all this stuff again. And I said, I'm just going to go back. And if they break, they break. If they don't, then they don't. And it was really crazy, because the moment I made that decision, almost all the pain went away. It was crazy. So I didn't know it at the time, but now, well, of course, so much of this pain is in the mind. It's not that it doesn't exist. It existed. And my mind was capable of creating so much pain, physical pain. And I would learn that lesson more deeply over the course of my career. I mean, that can lead to broken bones. That can lead to punctured lungs. That could lead to all these things, all just in the mind. But I never knew that at that time. So when I finally essentially surrendered and said, well, I'm going to go back no matter what, they hurt a little less, but they still were there. It was always in the back of my mind that they could snap at any time. So, yeah, I ended up going back, and one of my biggest goal that I had, even more than making it through, because I didn't feel like I had it control. People get pneumonia. We had guys in the first class get the staph infection, where they had to get all their muscles and their skin taken off because of the flesh-eating bacteria and all that stuff. I hadn't met too many guys to know that it's not in your control whether you make it or not. It really is not. So my goal was to never be in a goon squad again. The first time I went to SEAL training, so they have a goon squad that is, everybody goes on a run, and about a mile before you finish, they have this cutoff where if you're not with the main group of runners, then you're going to put you in the goon squad. And so while the main group finishes up and they start stretching out and drinking water, all the rest of us in the goon squad, we're doing fireman carries, we're getting wet and sandy, we're just getting hammered, doing real wheelbarrow races and bear crawls and all this stuff. And it's designed to see whether or not you want to be there for one. And number two, if you're not strong enough to be there, it'll get you stronger to be there, or it's going to break you, one of the two. And my first time, I was in every single goon squad we had in the whole class, and it was almost like a egoic badge of honor that, oh, whoa, I'm in the goon squad too, right? All right, okay, cool. Like I was almost not in it, but I'm going to be in it, And I never wanted to be in another goon squad again, and I wasn't. I ran fast enough, and I was strong enough. I didn't run fast enough, and I wasn't strong enough. I ran fast, and I was strong. But what pissed me off though was, the goon squad was a certain line behind me way back there, but the longer training went on, the more slower runners went away, and I ended up being the slowest guy in the class again. But I wasn't in the goon squad. I was always in the thing. In fact, when we finished our first phase final run test, I passed with graduating times, and I was the slowest runner in the class. So I was so pissed off, but hey, you know what I mean? I accomplished that goal, which was really good for me, because that's a big deal,
The obvious question, what impact did 9/11 have on you wanting to get back in and do this again?
I was already training to come back. And oh my gosh, being in Hawaii when September 11th happened was like being on Mars. The top story of the news that day was this little girl getting run over by a car in Kaneohe. Oh, and in other news, it was just so weird being there, because I was still very much, mainlander, this was happening to my country kind of thing. And that was not the vibe in Hawaii. And so we had, as paramedics, we had badges. And so I put a black ribbon on my badge, and, I knew all the people in all the hospitals, because we drop off so many patients. And we dropped off a patient, and one of my friends who was at the reception desk was like, "Hey, what you got a black ribbon on your badge for?" And I said, "Yeah, I don't know if you heard, but in in New York, all these people in Washington D.C. and they go, oh yeah, I think I heard about that." No kidding. That happened the night of September 11th in Oahu. Oh yeah, I think I heard something about that. It was nuts. So, and I also remember being, in the military in peacetime, and all we did was complain about that. We wanted, we wanted to go to war. And so in some sense, it made me more excited. And I was not conscious in any way. So there was a lot of retribution, a lot of vengeance, a lot of, now I'm training to come kill you motherfuckers kind of thing, I just didn't know any better, but yeah.
Class, well, real quick, going back in, they didn't make you go through boot camp again, did they?
No. In fact, I went in as a E5 because of my education and training as a paramedic. So yeah, no boot camp. I didn't have to go to corps school again. I did have to go. Oh, that's what I was going to say. Because I was going back at 29 and knowing that I could get hurt again, I went in as a reservist. Because I didn't want to be in the Navy again if I wasn't in the SEAL team. So the contract is I go in as a reservist, and if I graduate BUDS, then I convert that contract over into active duty. And so when I showed up, when I officially re-enlisted into the Navy, I was part of a reserve unit for a couple of months before I went to BUDS. And so, yeah, it didn't feel like I was in the Navy, but I was, yeah.
Second time through, which class did you class up with?
246.
And were you able to make it all the way through?
Mm-hmm.
Now, where does the shoulder injury come in?
Well, while I was in first phase, we were running with the boats on our head towards the Hotel del Coronado. So we were running north, and we hadn't made it very far. And I felt a pop in my neck, and I thought for minutes that I broke my neck. And it was an absolute uncool situation because I had so much baggage coming with me on the, like, you've got to make it through or your life is going to be useless. You are going to be useless, all of this. And so during these minutes of wondering whether or not my neck was broken, I just remember checking in with my feet and my fingers and things. And I was still running. I could still feel everything, but my neck was on fire. And so I started protecting my neck, which on the outside looks like, and I was ducking boat, which is like one of the most cardinal sins that anybody could do in SEAL training. Like if you duck a boat, there is nothing worse than that. But I didn't feel like I had an option. I was like, it's either that or I'm gonna break my neck all the way through, kind of thing. And so I navigated through all that stuff, trying to heal a partially separated neck and I still ran with boats on my head. I wasn't always doing it. And so the whatever the trauma or whatever it was just continued to happen. And you don't stop running with those boats until after Hell Week. Once you graduate Hell Week, you don't have to run with the boats on your head anymore, but still it's like, that's the last 5.5 days straight of this thing. So that sucks bad. But I made it through. And then made it through Hell Week, made it into second phase. And one day in second phase early on, we had to run the obstacle course backwards, which is not the way it was designed to be run. So the obstacles are much more difficult. Most of them are. Not a problem though. It's just weird and unusual, and I had to run up. So they have a low wall and a high wall. Now, low wall is you run up stepping on these elevated tree stumps till you get to a certain point, and then you just hop up to the top and vault yourself over, and you land onto the ground. And the high wall is you have to climb up a rope with your feet kind of flat on the wall as you're going up, and then you zip down the rope on the way down. Well, when we ran it backwards, I went over the high wall with the ropes, and then I went over the low wall, but it's not meant to be approached from that angle. So you really had to be on your game to launch yourself from soft sand up to grab this thing and bring yourself over the top of this thing. And it's far, it's probably 10 or 12 feet. It's up there, And I didn't get it my first or my second time, which was it was happening. But I was so afraid of standing out in any negative way at all that everything just got real serious then. And I was like, man, if I don't make it this time, all these images, flashbacks of my days back in 199 were coming back. And I was like, there's no fucking way I'm going through that again. And so I turned around and I ran and I made it to the top. And I've been taking martial arts for years. And in the martial arts, we would roll all the time. And they call it ukemi, like receiving the ground. And so when I got up to the top of the wall, I just launched myself over the side of it. I landed on my feet and I did a dive roll on the sand, something I've done thousands of times, at least 1,000 times. And as soon as I rolled on the sand, I just felt this, and my shoulder did something it wasn't supposed to do. And I got up and I was like, what the hell did I just do? Because it hurt. I wasn't hurt. I was injured. You know what I mean? And then we had a soft sand run after that. And I'm sitting here running, holding my shoulder, and I'm last again. All this, I'm dead ass last. And they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I messed up my shoulder. And so, well, hurry up. I'm like, I am. And I'm barely doing this kind of a shuffle, very, very slow run. And I'm just sweating bullets. Like they couldn't understand what was wrong with me. And we made it back. And I said, what's wrong? I said, something's wrong. And they took me into medical, and I got my x-rays, and I had a 3rd degree shoulder separation. And I started crying. They're like, what the hell's wrong with you? I said, well, this is my 2nd time here. And we made, there's no rollbacks. There's no nothing. If I don't make it this time, then I don't make it.
You knew that going in? That was part of the contract? No rollback options?
With my wife.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And because I got hurt when I was 20, and I'm going back 29. I was an old man. I was ancient, And we had a life to get on with and this stuff, and so they talked to the doctors and said, well, you're in dive phase. The minimum requirements for dive phase is that you complete all the dives. You don't need your shoulder for a dive, and you need to pass your time runs and all this stuff. But we think that we can get you rehabbed in time to do, because I still had to run the O course in fast enough time. I had to do all that, and so we did, and I did, and I rehabbed enough to where I was able to pass the runs. I was able to pass everything. But all the while this is happening, my class is getting stronger and they're getting faster. And, it's not a problem for them to do 20 pull-ups with their kit on and all this stuff. And I'm just like struggling.
What is the grind? It's not just a routine, but the decision we make to wake up, give everything we've got, then find a way to go further. Grind, spelled GRND, is more than a brand. It's a movement, an emotion we all feel connected to as we work daily to pursue our goals and support each other. Founded by a former Army Ranger, Grind Activewear has a clear mission to give 100% and then some more in sport, fitness, and in life. Functional, high-quality performance wear that's rooted in American culture, because you demand gear that outworks the rest. Whether you're on the field, in the gym, or building your own lane, Grind is for those who refuse to settle. Go check out thegrindcollective.com and tap into something bigger than clothing. And while you're there, use the promo code TRANSITION15 to get 15% off your purchase. You're likely already on the grind. Maybe you just don't realize it yet, but the grind continues.
And I never caught up. I never physically caught up with my class after that shoulder separation. But and the whole time I never saw it as, dude, this is amazing that you're doing this. Is unbelievable. The whole time, like, you're an absolute piece of shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
you're
that's
comparing yourself to everybody else.
Yeah, totally. And but I just didn't know any better. I was, doing the best I could, and ended up graduating, and but barely. And so that was like the thing that stuck with me on the day that I graduated, because I went back through this timeline of the last 10 years that it took me to be sitting in that graduation chair, and all the broken bones and all the bleeding and all the dislocations and all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, but you just barely graduated. You suck. That was like the way I felt when I was graduating from SEAL training. It's just like, what? But yeah, I had a lot to learn.
But and this is that hindsight 2020 maturity thing. What do you call a doctor who graduates medical school with a B?
Oh yeah,
doctor,
or even a D. Yeah, totally.
What do you call the guy who graduates last from SEAL training? A SEAL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's not the mentality of the SEAL teams,
right?
It's, if you're not first, you're a loser. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, like I think that is a commonly accepted, commonly thought about thing where, yeah, what do you call the guy who graduates last in medical school? Doctor. But that quote there's no place for that in the SEAL teams. It's, wait a minute, you graduated last in BUDS? Like, what's your problem? What's wrong?
Was that put on yourself, or did you ever actually get that verbalized to you?
You stand out when you're not among the top performers, when you're just below the middle of the class, you stand out for not good reasons. And the mentality, the alpha type thing. I mean, all of these guys, and I didn't know this then, but all of these guys are suffering from their self-image and self-love and all this stuff. And so the moment they see weakness, they're all over it because they don't have that relationship for themselves. And, you know, so I absolutely, from the moment I separated my shoulder, I absolutely stood out. And I had friends, of course, and all of that was good, but it was always there. And so the vast majority, just like everything else, the vast majority of it, 99% of it was all in my mind. And then there was some of it that existed externally too. There were third phase instructors who had no idea how well I was doing in first phase. They didn't see any of that stuff. They just saw this guy. Well, how come it's harder for you to do 16 pull-ups with gear on than it is for the rest of these guys? You know, you need to work harder, kind of thing. I don't blame them. They're not doing anything wrong, but they hadn't seen what I had been through and what all it took for me to even get there. And they don't care. What do they care? It's not their job. They have one objective, you know, and there's no compassion is required for them to do an amazing job at their job. So, yeah.
With your time spent on the East Coast, did you have a preference when you were coming out as far as what team you wanted, a West Coast or an East Coast team?
So I grew up in California. I love California. I only wanted to be in California, but being on the teams in the West Coast, my wife was pregnant at the time. We just knew that if we stayed in San Diego, that we would be hiring somebody else to raise our child while both of us worked. And that's not something either one of us wanted to do. So we chose to go to the East Coast. I did it begrudgingly. I didn't want anything to do with the East Coast. And I didn't know any better other than I just knew that it was in California. And it's funny because, you know, so your life in the teams, you go to these different training blocks that you're required to do every single cycle. And all of our training blocks were phenomenal. You know, going to Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, you know, doing stuff in Louisville and Key West and all of this stuff. On the West Coast, almost all of their training is limited to San Clemente Island, where you go and you're in buds. There's nothing there. La Posta, California, there's nothing there. Or Nyland, California, which there is nothing there. It's just like these horrible, and I didn't know that until probably my second or third platoon. And I was like, oh man, I'm really lucky that I went to the East Coast, because being a SEAL on the East Coast as compared to being a SEAL on the West Coast, and just in my opinion, doesn't mean anything, but I'm really glad I was on the teams on the East Coast. So we're never home anyway.
When did you get to your first team?
June of 2005. Yeah.
And did you have that moment? I'll call it you're by yourself, that quiet time where you went, holy shit, I made it. I'm a Navy SEAL.
No. Nope. And that killed me. I didn't have that. There was a moment where I knew I was going to graduate buds. And it might have been like a week before we graduated, because we're just getting uniforms ready at that point. We've done all the things, you know, as long as I don't do anything stupid and get arrested or something, I was going to graduate.
No Navy SEAL's ever gotten arrested.
Never happens. Never. We don't do anything wrong, right? We don't do anything illegal at all. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I sat in my car and just waiting to feel fireworks. Do you realize what you just did? 10 years. And and it's silence. And nothing, and emptiness too, by the way. Okay. So I go and graduate. Maybe I'd need to wait till I graduate. And I'm like, nothing. Not only silence, but emptiness. Okay, well, I joined to be a SEAL. I'm not a SEAL yet. We'll see how that goes. I go to the SEAL teams. I show up on my first day.
What team did you get assigned to?
2. Nothing. not only that, but you better step up your game, dude, kind of thing. This is not the time to celebrate. It was the opposite. For as hard of work as I put in to get there, when I got to the team, I felt like I had to elevate that by 1,000%, because these guys this wasn't buds anymore. This is the teams. And so I get to the teams. I go to combat. I save lives. I performed well in combat, which who knows how they're going to perform in combat. And so in that moment, realizing that I can trust myself, that other guys can trust me under fire. Nothing. And even after I retired, I made E8. I was in for 20 years. I led some of the most amazing human beings I'd ever known in the world. I made smart tactical decisions in war. I was there for people who needed me really, really badly in moments, and I showed up really powerfully for them. Nothing. And I retired. Here it comes. Where's the fireworks? Where's the confetti? Crickets. Not even crickets, just emptiness. I couldn't believe it. Now I fully understand now, but I didn't understand any of it then. And so, yeah, that was a hard thing to experience. It's like, what the fuck do I have to do to experience this whole idea of maybe this, illusion of fulfillment? Because people would talk to me when people would hear my story over the course of my life, they would talk to me about how I was like the quintessential man or something, or every guy should strive to have a life like yours. And I was so disjointed from that. I didn't even know how to respond to them. I didn't even know how to be, well, to be honest with you, it's not that big of a deal. It's, so I would find myself lying and saying, yeah, man, you keep going, bro. You'll do what I did one day. And I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. Because I couldn't even reconcile it within myself. How was it that I wasn't experiencing all these things that these people were thinking that I would be experiencing? It just didn't make any sense to me.
I'd be interested to know the guys that you served with, how many of them, in a weird way, maybe even felt the same to a degree of, I did all this, did all that for this?
I think on some point, because after a while, like the bling of the Trident, it's just something that you put on your uniform. Sort of, it either means something to you deeply or it doesn't. But I don't think I ever had I had a relationship with a SEAL this is everything I thought it was going to be and better. All the admin stuff that we had to do, all the, war, the life of SEALs, you got like maybe 2 or 3% excitement. All the rest of it is jumping through hoops, following rules that are like against the grain of your soul sort of thing, and doing, getting talked to about shaving and all of that stuff. They've all said, all the ones I know have at least once said, if I would have known that this is what it was going to be like, I would have never went to Buds. And then we also had the same thing, like, hell yeah, this is why we became SEALs, So, yeah.
So how many total re-enlistments did you do?
Oh, I don't know.
And the reason I ask that is where you get there and you're waiting for the big bells to ring and the confetti and all that, and it never kind of comes. What keeps you motivated to stay in and keep going?
Well, despite what I just said, I was a medic on the SEAL team, man. I was like, this is the coolest thing you could ever do. What else? And, wars were going on and guys were dying, and, I had it in my mind that I had something to do with serving my country and all of these things. It was all worth it. It was hard. I was gone 300 days a year sometimes. And I did the math one day. I can't remember how far in I was, but the math that I did was if I stay in the military and if I stay in the SEAL teams, I'm going to miss 5 total years of my daughter's life. 5 calendar years of her life is going to be illusion to me. And there were parts of me that believed fundamentally that if there was one thing that I was put here in this world to do, it was to be her dad. There was never like, you're here to be a SEAL. It never was that. And so at some point I started to kind of, there's a different mentality between single team guys and married team guys for all kinds of reasons. And I was always married the whole time I was in the team. So it was never like the fundamental component core of my life. Like it was some other guys where they were like, their clothes were SEAL clothes. You know what I mean? It was like, it was everything. And thank God, there's guys like that in the teams. It just, I love being around the boys. I love going on road trips and doing all the things. And it was just trying to balance that between, just doing everything I could to get home and just hug my daughter to death, Did
you do an even 20?
20 years in one day.
No desire to go 30?
None at all. At 16 years, it was very clear to me that I didn't belong anymore. The Navy was going a direction. The SEALs were going a direction. These were all going directions in ways in which I was absolutely uninterested in. And that was really hard for me because I've been so used to my whole life really stepping into just being as I am, no matter whose toes that was going to step on, no matter whose feathers that ruffled. And so the idea that I was going to have to keep my mouth shut for 4 years was almost unimaginable. But I chose to do that because the trade-off was retirement. If I just hang in 4 more years, I'll have 20 years of service, and for the rest of my life, I'm going to do this. So as it became this huge game is, can you shut the fuck up for 4 years? Man, talk about training, because I did for the most part. I really, really did. I divested myself from like this passionate, this is wrong, we shouldn't be doing this, to, okay, this is the direction that we're going. I get it, understand. I'm here as part of the team. You guys aren't here to work around me, so let's go, which is against so many parts of how I am. But it was the decision that I chose to do, with the trade-off being retirement.
What was your wife's take on it? Could she see the change in you? And where I'm going with this is, I've heard somebody say that they were going, their wife was there supporting them, and then the day they woke up and said, all right, I'm done with this, she broke down and started crying because she was ready for him to be done.
My wife was going through her own stuff, and she had a lot of unresolved and unrecognized trauma that she was having to navigate. And with me being gone, 300 days, sometimes I was just a disruptor in the family when I came home. She needed things to be a certain way because it was her job to raise our daughter. And it was her fundamental objective in life to be the most powerful mother that has ever been. And because, none of us understood this whole thing about mental health and all this, she just fought through it all. And but it manifested outwardly towards like OCD behaviors and anxiety behaviors and this stuff that she was sort of at the mercy of. And so was everyone around. That's just kind of the way it goes. And we were just doing the best we could in that. We didn't know anything, we were just doing the best we could to navigate all that stuff. And I think it may not have even mattered to the surface level of her awareness what I did or didn't do. I was kind of irrelevant. Not entirely, but there was definitely an element of me being irrelevant because they had to get used to so many moments of time where I wasn't there. And she did the best job I think a human being could do when I would come home from work, like trying to integrate me into the family timeline and structure and all this. And of course, I had my own ideas of maybe how our daughter should be spoken to and all these things that weren't in line with her. So we had, these are things that all military families have to go through. My wife at the time, she was very strong. She had this iron wall that nobody could break, which I now know what those iron walls are. I didn't at the time. And so everybody was suffering, and she wasn't doing anything wrong. She was doing the goddamn best job she could do. And then she was doing an amazing job. And she was slowly breaking on the inside, at the same time, while all the, we understand that because we have our own experience of what that is on the job. She was doing the same thing as a single mom, essentially,
And really, when you would come home and be home for those 4 months, 6 months, while you're waiting to basically work up to redeploy again, you're just upsetting the apple cart is all you're pretty much doing.
Mm-hmm.
And you're disrupting her routine and everything else.
Yeah. And even though she loved me, there was a resentment that, even though she wanted me around, there was a resentment that I was saying the things that I was saying, for example, to Isabel or our daughter, or feeding routines or nap routines or whatever. What are you? She's doing everything she can to balance all of these spinning plates of life and healthcare and school and all this. And here I come being like, oh, here's some applesauce. What are you doing? And it's just hard for everybody. Yeah.
It's the component that never gets a lot of the attention. And I've said this in many episodes now and talking with many of the guests is when I say we, society only looks at the cool stuff, and like you said, they bestow this sense of awe on you. We're a Navy SEAL, but we never talk about the damage physically that it takes for a lot of these men to get through this training. We never talk about the damage that happens to a lot of the families.
Mm-hmm.
It's the one component that everybody conveniently just ignores. Hey, great, you served 20 years for this country. But what did it do to you personally and physically?
Yeah.
So when did you get out?
I retired in 2018. But to your point, before I retired, I tried to do this thing that had never been done before. I started sending all these letters that I wanted Congress to sign off to present an actual military medal to spouses for their years of service. And I tried really hard for that. And, it was a lot of deaf ears and that kind of thing. But I felt like it could be given like every 4 years or something. Hey, man, I was a Navy military spouse for 8 years. And it's like, wow, that's a big deal. Or 20 years, felt like they deserved it all. Because we get medals. Sometimes I see people get medals for taking out the trash. Like you give a wife or a spouse of any kind, thank you, Jesus, because if it wasn't for her, I would have been.
Even just some sort of public acknowledgement at your transition out, acknowledge the family that was there by your side, even if it was back home while you were deployed.
Yeah, it's everything. Because if I came home to fires going off, she paid all the bills. She did. She was amazing. Yeah.
Coming up to your decision to get out, were you making any plans? Did you have anything in place for your transition and what you were going to do afterwards?
In 2017, a year before I retired, I found out about an organization, the Honor Foundation, which I'm sure you're aware of. And I went through, and it was an amazing program that helps special operations veterans transition to the civilian world. And they showed us all kinds of jobs and things, and I just didn't really know where I fit in. But one of the things that kept ringing was I kept hearing corporate executives ask me when I was active duty, how is it the SEALs work and communicate so well together? And they asked me that question so many times. Finally, when I retired, I was, why don't I just start a company that answers that question the best way that I know how? I got my own perspective for what it's worth. And by the way, I think that there are things that the SEALs do that I think that they suck at. And if we do this, maybe it could be a better approach. Things like emotional intelligence and compassion and all of that stuff. And so we started that essentially day one coming out of retirement. And it's been interesting for sure.
And what was it like getting that company off the ground?
It was a lot harder than I thought. I really felt like if you build it, they will come. Well, there's Navy SEAL based leadership and communication with emotional intelligence. Oh my gosh. I thought we were but that's not how it went down. We were, I think, in business for 8 or 9 months before we got our first event. And then I wasn't what I would describe in any way, shape, or form consciously aware about anything. But I also was in a place where I didn't want to do anything that didn't matter. Everything that I did had to be hugely powerful. Otherwise, it's not worth doing. And I don't mean like big explosion. I mean like deeply, deeply meaningful to people. So we created this curriculum that, it was about real transformation, not like, hey, transform your teams and all. It was deep, 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 real stuff. And and it took me a long time to realize that companies don't care and the people don't care about that. It took me years to understand that. And it's not because people suck or they're not as good as they should be or anything like that. It's just that on average, people stay in an organization for 4 years or less sometimes. And they're leaving because they leave or the company makes them leave. And so when we're talking about building and maintaining these cultures within these organizations, that's just for the leadership. They don't have the time or the inclination to invest in their people, to be fully aligned with their organization. It's all just patchwork. If you've ever seen road work on the East Coast, it's just patchwork. And they're always, and they all know it. The people know that they're not working their best for these organizations, and the organization knows that they're not working their best for their people. They all say it, your family, all the stuff, and everyone knows that it's all fake. I did not see that. I thought there's a really deep, profound way where we can connect these two things so that people are in line. I can't even hardly get it out of my mouth because how ridiculous it sounds. It's not that they don't care because they're not good people. It's their ROI is not there. It's not there for the organization to invest their time and their money in their people because their people are going to be leaving. And it's not in the people's best interest to invest all that stuff because they know they're going to be gone too anyway. And it took me a long time to realize that that's just the reality of it. It's not a pessimistic way. That's just observing what I've seen. Even in some of the most highly performing organizations that we've trained, Google, we've trained, you name it. We've trained a lot of people. And it's like, oh man, it's not this way. Okay. Google X is one thing. They're amazing human beings because they're like a think tank and it's a different setup. But for most organizations that are set up in the typical way, they just don't have the time or the inclination to. We used to run into these things all the time. We'd be like, hey, we're coming into San Diego. We got this leadership convention going on. We want to do this. All right, cool. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this and this. Oh, that sounds amazing. I was like, okay, this is what it costs. Like, oh, we're not going to do that. But you're spending more money on alcohol than you are on training. Like, well, yeah, they like to drink. I'm like, well, you're going to get better drinkers and you're going to get leaders. I don't know, you know? And they didn't care. And big giant companies, hey, our sales are just, we need to come together as a team. Okay, cool. Here's what we're going to do. All of that sounds amazing. Okay, this is what we're going to have to invest in order to make this happen. Yeah, we think we're going to focus on sales training. I was like, okay, I'll talk to you again next year, and you're going to be in the same place. And you talk to them, and they even though they don't move and they don't change, and they don't. So that's yeah, okay, yes, okay.
Let's cover the marketing. What's the name of the company?
The Trident Approach.
My next question: did you do your entire time on the East Coast?
Almost all of it. I did some time in Germany. Unbelievable. And then my last 3 years was in San Diego. I came home, yeah.
When you got out and decided to start this company, was the desire to have it based here in Southern California, or was it just a matter of convenience to stay here in Southern California for you?
It was a good place to start just because of the branding of Navy SEALs in San Diego. But we absolutely had these ideas to franchise, have an East Coast, have a travel team, have all this, because our approach to leadership was very experiential. It wasn't just look at this whiteboard, here's what you can do. It was getting your hands dirty in leadership, getting your hands dirty in communication and all that. But yeah, so we obviously had to pivot away from that once we finally realized what we were doing. So now we more work with individuals who are interested in growing this part of themselves for themselves. And we also work a lot with YPOs, and those groups are perfect for what we're doing because each individual person are really, really searching for the next level, and they're all in. And they're all together. And so it is a familyhood of sorts to watch each other grow and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Boiling it back down to basics of taking an idea,
Mm-hmm.
starting your company,
Mm-hmm.
and then having to that grind period until you got your first, I'll call it big client. You said it was about 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
How do you stay positive through that period and keeping it going? Because where I'm going with this is somebody listening may not necessarily want to start a coaching or a consulting business,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a lot of people out there that have an idea for a business.
Yeah.
And half the battle is, how do I keep it going until it hits?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can only do my best. It's almost not fair for me to answer this because I had a retirement and disability, and I found out proof positive through COVID that I didn't need to make a single penny and I could live. So it's kind of not fair. But for me, I just knew that I was on the path. And there's a feeling that you can experience when you are on the path. I mean, flow state comes and all these, it's like no one was going to stop me kind of thing.
I just want to stop you right there and bring up, that's an important point that I think is to bring out, is you didn't need the money, but at the same token, you were committed to this entity because you believed in it. So
Mm-hmm.
even though you didn't need the money, there was a drive to say, I'm going to make this happen.
Totally. Like this, in other words, this came from God. There was just too much universal energy and push towards facilitating this. The relationships that we were making, seeing the people go through our training and the emotional response that people were having as they were going through our training and the power that it was just like, what the hell? I'm not going to do anything else. There's nothing else that's even comes close to this. I would later find out that's not true, but at the time it was gigantic to see these people go through. I was like, I didn't even want to do anything else. You could pay me $500,000 a year, $1 million a year. It wouldn't equate to watching somebody overcoming some kind of fear or just breaking down some sort of self-limitation thing. I mean, that's the coolest stuff there is. And we were seeing that all the time. So it was like, yeah, there was nothing that was going to keep us from making this thing work.
You mentioned basically that fight with selling the idea to a company, and they would buy into the idea. That's a great idea. But then when you would pitch the price, it's not in our budget. We're not going to spend that money. On the flip side to that, though, was there that one pivotal moment where that one company did go, okay, we're going to bring you in and have you do that training? And then is that kind of the domino effect? Once you got that first one in word of mouth?
Yeah. Yep. That's how it went, really. We had the first ones with a company called Light Point. They're based out of Northern California, around San Francisco. And as soon as we were done with that, we got a call from Audemars Piguet. There's like $1 million watches out of Switzerland, and they had a leadership summit in Muscat, Oman, that they wanted us to come out and train 120 of their people. And then, and then not long after that, Google came, and then not long after that, the YPOs came, and then, and then it just kept going.
So it's just a matter of going through buds in a sense of, hey, this startup process is going to be hell, but we just got to keep pushing forward, and it'll eventually hit.
It doesn't have to be. It was, I guess, maybe a sort of hell for myself, but that was only because I didn't know any better. Now, if I was to experience the exact same thing, there wouldn't be anything wrong with it at all. It just is, and fully accepting everything as it is. And in the knowing that as long as I continually lean into the area that gives me the most excitement with everything I got, with no intention or no expectation of what the outcome is going to be, there's no stopping me. So whether it's swimming upstream or downstream or whatever, it's all part of it. It doesn't suck. It's just the way of things.
Going towards warrior-wise in your experience with Ibogaine, where I want to kind of let you lead the train is the sense of, I'm interested in, when does your rock bottom, and I'll use that term loosely, come to where you realize I need to go do this? And then is that in conjunction with warrior-wise, or are they two separate paths?
A warrior side you're talking about?
I'm sorry. Warrior side.
Warrior side is very recent. I've been on this path of conscious awareness for a while. And my low point, which is very different from most people that I know, my low point was when I retired and I realized that there were no fireworks coming. There was no confetti coming after all the 30-year saga that I went through in order to get to that point, that this is it. I was basically standing on top of this notional mountain of clawing and kicking and bleeding and breaking just to get up there. And in that moment of, hey, man, there's nothing here for you, that was huge. And in that moment, however, I got what I would later come to consider knowing. I had this experience of knowing that everything I had pursued in my life had all been external to me. Getting a Trident, or, getting even medals. I did pursue, like I wanted to be a freaking war hero. Like that's the greatest thing a SEAL could do, and all these external accolades, achievements, qualifications, all of it was external. The one place that I haven't looked, young man, is within you. And when I heard that, or when I experienced that knowing, I didn't even know what that meant. What do you mean within me? It made no sense to me. And I didn't have any friends that were asking that question. I didn't have any friends that were in the space of, these inward journeys. So it was just this nebulous, okay, well, I guess I got to go inward somehow, and I didn't know what that was. And so we started the Trident Approach, and we were in business for about a year.
Your body is built for more energy, more focus, more strength. But if you're feeling sluggish, unmotivated, or mentally drained, it's time to make a change. At Human Performance TRT, science meets convenience. Their hormone replacement therapy weight loss programs, and mental health solutions are all designed to help you feel and perform at your best without ever leaving home. They offer medical-grade hormone optimization, weight loss support with personalized health coaching, and ketamine therapy for depression, anxiety, and trauma, all guided by qualified mental health professionals. HPTRT is veteran and first responder owned, and they make it simple to optimize your health. There's no locked-in contracts, and if you're already on a hormone program, switching is easy. There's no extra test if your blood work is under 6 months old. Ready to take back your edge? Go to hptrt.com and use the promo code TDP for 30% off. That's hptrt.com and use the promo code TDP for 30% off your entire program. Stop waiting. Your peak performance starts now.
And then one of my guys came to me and said, hey, I'm not coming to work next week. There's an organization that takes SEALs down to Mexico and treats their traumatic brain injury, depression, addiction, all the stuff with psychedelics. And that was the first time I'd ever heard of psychedelics being used in the context of mental health. But when he said that, I knew that he was smacked up pretty good with TBI, traumatic brain injury. He was addicted to Ambien, and he got smacked up pretty good with post-traumatic stress. So I was like, dude, I don't care what, go send it. And I can't wait till you get back. We'll be here. So he came back. He had a light in his eyes and a vibrancy to a smile none of us had ever seen before. His skin color was different. We're like, dude, what the hell happened? Got no words, life-changing. Got to introduce you to them. So I had this inkling that I wanted to be, before I started the Trident Approach, I felt like a fantastic path for me would be to go become a PsyD, almost like a psychiatrist. And just work with veterans with post-traumatic stress. But I chose to do Trident Approach instead. But I went down to Mexico and I literally saw them saving lives right out from under my nose. And I was like, what is this? And they said, well, we got an extra dose if you want. And I'm like, I'm not in the military anymore. Like, let's do it. I don't have any P tests I have to pass. I got it, dude. Let's go. And I don't have any baggage. I don't have the baggage these guys have.
At least you thought.
Yeah, totally. I didn't see anybody's leg flying across the sky. I didn't, I never had to kill anybody. It's just the way, it just somehow it just ended up that way. All the time I spent in combat, I never had to kill anybody. So I'm just, my biggest monster in my life was my dad and my brother. My biggest monster in my life was my mind as it related to my dad and my brother. And yeah, I took the medicine and almost in an instant, everything I thought about who I am, the world around me, all the things that I thought about my dad and my brother, it was all bullshit. Like in an instant, it's all bullshit. Here is what is true. And what's very difficult to explain to people who haven't connected with elevated states of consciousness is that they're like, you realize you're on drugs, right? I've never known truth until I've experienced it through the lens of psychedelics or elevated states of consciousness. There's just no other way to explain it. And there is no way to explain it. It just is either within your experience or it is not. And so having those deep, deep, deep connections to something that is clearer and is more in alignment with truth than my fear-based thinking, it changed so many things. And I still had a lot of healing to do. Things that I thought that I'd forgiven, I realized I didn't even know what forgiveness was. I didn't love myself. Where the fuck did that come from? I thought I was, I was always happy and all. It was all fake. But I didn't know it. It was crazy. And it was just showing me truth. It's like, you think this, but this is what is. And you think you're here, but you're not. Here's where you are. And it was hard. It was getting my teeth kicked in and getting dragged through the mud. But I realized that day what it actually meant, turning inward. Oh, I didn't know all this existed in here. Oh my gosh. It was like all the stuff I was avoiding my whole life.
You mentioned earlier that while you were in an active, you did in your mind, a perceived balance of not making the teams your whole identity.
Mm-hmm.
And where I'm going with this is coming out. Did you struggle with now being a civilian, or was it an easy transition for you because you had that new mission with getting?
It was easy. It was, I had one of the easiest transitions, mostly because of the Honor Foundation, but also because it really was time for me to leave the teams. I just, seeing what leadership was doing, the whole idea of brotherhood and all that stuff, that existed no further than the platoons. That was in the platoons where the brotherhood and all that stuff lasted. But senior leadership is like perception versus reality. What a lot of people don't realize is active duty SEALs are walking around with an anvil that's 2 inches above their head that's just waiting to be cut. If you do anything wrong, people are out to burn you. It's not this gentle thing. It's like who do we smash to pieces over this? Guys were losing their tridents for stuff that just didn't make any sense. And I have friends who were crucified in the media for things that they never did, but it just looked like they did it. And the Navy leadership had no choice, but in their minds, they had every choice in the world to do the right thing. And they chose not to, deliberately, to just hang these guys just so it gave the public an appearance that they had accountability, instead of saying, no, public, we understand that you think this, but that's not what happened. That's not what is. We're going to handle our situation. You guys do your thing. They're just not incapable of having. So there were so many things. And one of the big, gigantic reasons why I joined the SEAL teams was the whole idea of brotherhood on a deep level, real level. And to know that brotherhood didn't last very much past the platoons or the troops. Like, I got to roll, man. This isn't the place. So when it was time for me to transition, I'm like, I've been having my bags packed standing on the sidewalk for 4 years. Like, here, my bus finally comes, and I'm like, I threw my pack. Let's go, man. It's time to go. Yeah.
You're hearing a lot of that same mentality today in the first responder community,
Mm-hmm.
And nobody operating in these spaces doesn't believe that when it's time to drop the hammer on who truly deserves it. Mm-hmm. And we all know those situations where that guy or girl needs it. It's when you start going on witch hunts because you're trying to give the public the perception that
it's crazy.
That's where the problems come in. And that's where the brotherhood, the trust in the organizations get undermined.
Yeah.
And I use the analogy of the military experienced this in Vietnam, where prior to Vietnam, those of us at home didn't really know what went on in war.
Yeah.
We heard stories, but it was Vietnam in the sense that you could turn on 6 o'clock news and go, oh shit, that's what war is like.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, war is still war. And there are certain things that get done that, you can't put society's microscope on it because war is different.
Mm-hmm.
I say the same thing today with law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody doesn't want to go to jail. It's never going to look pretty on camera.
Yeah.
And organizations need to stand behind their men and women and go, I know what you're seeing on these body-worn camera footage, but you need to look at the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to police our own, and we're going to drop the hammer on who truly needs it done to them. But so many organizations today almost feel like they're driven by appeasing the masses or the public. You're saying the same thing that was impacting the SEAL teams.
100%. I do feel that the SEAL teams were the last bastion of hope. I think, as far as I could tell, from my perspective, what you were talking about Vietnam happened for me more like during Tailhook. For those of you who don't remember, like in 1991, there's an annual
those pilot
conference in Seattle called Tailhook. I don't know if they still have it or not, but there was a lot of really shitty things that happened in the hotel. Women were being raped, and it was debauchery. And it was when those women first brought to bear, hey, this is what's going on. And oh, by the way, this is kind of how everything is. It was the first time the country really started, well, wait a minute, this can't happen. And it was there was a reaction, which is good. Nothing could have been worse than to not respond to that. And they reacted in a way that wasn't helpful. There was this rebound effect of everybody's and I think it was in that moment, at least in my mind, in my experience, that was the moment where the military became like this political action arm rather than a military fighting force. We were a big corporation, and we were, of course, that's probably not true. It's just my experience. But yes, it slowly started incorporating, because when I got into the teams, for example, we had beer in our platoon huts and we could just drink after work, and the chief's mess had all this stuff, and we had posters that no one would approve of, but these were our man caves, and nobody really had anything to say about it. And if you didn't have that stuff, they'd be, what's wrong with you guys? But it slowly started to creep in. And then it was, if you even have the perception that you're doing things you're not supposed to, the hammer's dropping, and it's dropping hard. And, you could just see it coming. And that was that whole thing where I was like, the last 4 years, just because I could see that it was already rampant in the teams, where senior SEAL leadership was, adjusting even their own personal values as a human to meet expectation, or they just weren't strong leaders. It was brutal.
You can call it a zero tolerance policy. You can call it throwing the bathwater out with the baby, or the baby out with the bathwater. We tend to do that. When we see something, tailhook is a great example. Horrible. Mm-hmm. But it was a contained incident. Mm-hmm. But it was that, let's do these massive sweeping changes. That's how we always seem to do it. I don't think it's just to the military. I don't think it's to first responder community. It seems that's how we do things in society.
Yeah, it's our culture.
We see something that's wrong, and we go completely the opposite way, and we take out just common sense, mm-hmm. And then we get all the way over here and like, well, wait a minute, now we've gone too far, and it's this giant, pendulum that you're trying to, can we just get to the middle?
Yeah. We were talking about kind of avoiding politics, but it is what comes to mind about, I don't think that the people on the left realize that the reason why the right is the way it is because they're trying to fight back for this whole thing. And believe me, I'm no fan of what's going on in the extreme right either. But it is like a lot of these people, another way to put it is, I don't think that the Americans who were getting on camera and standing behind microphones saying, troops come home as soon as possible, I don't think they realized how much longer they were prolonging the war. I could understand why they wouldn't realize that, but every time the Taliban turns on the news and they hear, this war is this, we got to do, they're like, oh, we're winning.
Right.
And we're going to stay there for a certain amount of time. And I don't know, who knows what, but yes, those pendulum swings of trying to fight for that real estate or that whatever landscape is creating all this, whatever you resist persists. So it's, I think that there was many, I don't think, for example, that tailhook was this isolated thing. I think it was permeating throughout. I mean, you watch some movies. What was that? I was just watching a movie. I was watching what was the movie with Matthew Broderick where he hacks the game and it's the nuclear war? It's War Games. There's a scene in the movie where Matthew Broderick is like kept prisoner inside of an office room, and there's an Air Force guy who's supposed to be watching over him, but there's this like really hot secretary there, and he's like literally touching her all, and she's like, what are you doing? Stop. And he's like, you want this and all. And it seems like that shit was happening, dude. You know what I mean? So, but it doesn't mean that it was happening everywhere. And you're totally right. There were a lot of people who were being held accountable for things that they never did, they never said, they never all this stuff. And it was just this sweeping action. And it's not helpful for anybody. And we didn't seem maybe things like that are happening right now with Doge, for example. Like, we don't have the time or the inclination to go individual by individual of like, hey, is this? And so people are being held accountable or accused of things that they never did. And so now there's this big monstrous response or no response. They're just leaving, and everything is, all of that stuff is not easy. I don't, it's just hard.
I'll use a Navy analogy and then we can move on of just, you don't turn a ship. In most instances, you don't turn it rapidly. You don't throw the wheel. It's small incremental changes till it changes to the necessary course. That's where I think if we would just kind of work the middle and then just make subtle changes, we won't get way off course to where we're like, oh shit. But going back to you coming out of Mexico and experiencing that, how were you post? And then when does the desire going, okay, now I want to give back and help others through this process?
The giving back was almost instantly, because I went in with the idea that I was going to be somehow serving. I didn't realize that I was going to find all this work that I needed to do myself. So coming out of it, I was really lost. Like, it hurt. I was shaken. My foundations of my core fundamental beliefs of who I was and even the world around me were completely shaken. So it was very difficult to come out of Mexico, come back to California and just start living life again. It wasn't in a depressive state. It was more just being, what the hell is all of this now? So that took a while. That took a long time. In some ways, it's still happening, of still coming to a deeper and deeper and deeper understanding of what actually is. So, but it was getting better. I was getting better. I was becoming more resilient. I was learning. I was healing. There were things that the plant medicine that was doing that was like physically healing parts of me that no doctor could help. And then I think it was probably about 9 months or so after my first psychedelic experience where I was introduced to the idea of becoming a psychedelic integration coach. So I went to school. I was already a coach, but I went to school for the psychedelic piece of it. And then I just started holding space with veterans through their processes. And that's when, my whole life at the time was all about leadership and teams. And I just started to see all this connective tissue that psychedelics or elevated states of consciousness had with leadership. And so then that had a huge impact on our curriculum and our approach with the Trident Approach. And then, so we've been coaching for a while, and to now I've coached well over 400 veterans going through their process, mental health clinicians, executives, athletes, all going through their process of learning how to unlearn and drop all the old baggage to experience who they really are, who they always have been. And that's been really powerful, and nothing more. I told you there could be nothing cooler than this. Like, this is the thing. There could be nothing cooler than, at least so far. Yeah.
Do you find that that's your new purpose in life?
I think my purpose in life is to simply be. And I can choose to exist in this life however I want. And I am choosing to be in this life in this way, with this being my path, because it gives me the most fulfillment. There's no question. I don't think that I'm supposed to do something else or nothing. This is what I'm choosing.
Sponsorship for this podcast comes from Brothers in Arms USA. They're a veteran-owned and operated clothing and accessories brand that's 100% American-made. Every piece tells a story of brotherhood, respect, discipline, and honor. Deeply inspired by those who serve, those who have served, and those who have paid the ultimate price serving our great country. Whether you're an outdoor enthusiast, a proud patriot, or simply somebody who values high-quality American craftsmanship, they've got something for you. Go check out brothersinarms.com, spelled out fully, brothersandarms.com, and use the promo code TRANSITION20 to get 20% off your purchase.
I am going to experience life one way or the other. So how is it? even if I chose, for example, if I just started working as a janitor somewhere, there is something within the art of cleaning a space that can bring me closer to higher consciousness than just as much as meditation could, if I choose to approach that work in that way. I don't think there's anything special about something. I don't think I'm lost if I don't know what this is. I can just be whatever it is that I choose to do, just be very deeply in the midst of that, regardless of what it is, and I can come to the place that I'm, which is here, more clearly.
Let's talk about your book. Where'd the idea for that come about, and how was that process?
It's so funny because I don't read, like at all. And when I was in the Honor Foundation, I was assigned a coach, and I have a very interesting life. And as I'm talking to her, she's like, "You need to write a book." And you don't understand. There's no way, there's no way I'm writing anything. But I kept hearing that statement from people. And then it just became unavoidable. If you're going to have some sort of impact in the coaching realm, you have to have a book. And so this is before I understood that today that would be irrelevant to me. But back then it was very relevant to me. So I had all this resistance to it, and somebody asked me to contribute to a blog of theirs, and they asked me some leadership question, and my response was 13 pages long, and I said, I need to write. Okay, I can do this. If I can write 13 pages on a single answer to a single question, so I started writing, but I didn't know what book I was writing. I didn't know if I was writing like a Navy SEAL book. I didn't know if I was writing a leadership book. I didn't know if I was writing a book on the Trident Approach. I didn't know if I was writing a memoir. I didn't know. So I just started writing. And there was no sense to it. There was no order to it. There was no organization to it. I just was writing, and there was stuff all over different documents. There was no sense to it. But I ended up for 4 years writing, and I wrote 200,000 words when I was done. Okay, I'm done writing. And everything was all over the place. I didn't know. I was lost. But I had done enough work on myself that it was okay to be lost. I just let it be as it was. And then I went to Peru to sit with ayahuasca, and there was a really cool library they had that had all this jungle medicine, had these books on psychedelic leadership, or just psychedelics. They had Eastern stuff, all this. And the book wasn't by any means on the top of my mind. I had other things there, but there was enough. There was 200,000 words up there somewhere. And I sat in the medicine, and at one point in the medicine, they said, "Hey, if you want, your book can belong in that library if you wanted to." And that was all I needed. When I came home, I didn't even look at those 200,000 words. I just started from start to finish. And in 5 months, I wrote the book. And then it took them like a year to edit it because it turns out I don't know how to put sentences together. I don't know where commas go. And and then we published it, and it ended up being a book on the Trident Approach. And, sharing the best of what we learned in the SEAL teams combined with our deepest insights from elevated states of consciousness and how to lead the self in elite teams. And so it was good.
How much does writing play a part in your life today on a day-to-day? Is it something you still do regularly?
No, well, it just started because I told you the 200,000 words, so there's 76,000 words in Leading from the Deep. So that means there's like 130 something thousand words on the cutting room floor. And I just started putting all that stuff together. So the next book that's coming out is going to be called Healing from the Deep. And So I'm already almost 80% done with that. And so we're writing that, but we're writing that book. Number one, Leading from the Deep has been very, very helpful for the people that I run into who have read it for self-awareness, healing, understanding psychedelics, and even understanding principles of consciousness as it applies to leadership. So that's really cool. But I'm very excited about just writing a book on healing, that there's this whole other aspect to healing that has nothing to do with hospitals, that has nothing to do with drugs, that has nothing to do with our typical common approach. And I think people understand that. What I don't think is many people really understand. They say between 200,000 and 400,000 people a year die from medical malpractice. I mean, our approach to medicine is amazing, but it's it's not like the end all be all. And so what we're fighting against of these things that come into conflict with it doesn't make any sense to me. Why would you be arguing to protect something that is we're still practicing it? And no judgment. We're just practice. This is not a known thing. All the drugs we have, all these side effects and all the stuff. Who says that, this is the paradigm of how all things should be? I just don't feel that way anymore. There's another way to heal many, many, many things. And this absolutely applies to our approach to mental health. I think the common Western approach to mental health is essentially broken, and it always has been. There's an incredible quote from a very famous psychologist, Stanislav Grof. He said, "I learned more in 4 hours of psychedelic medicine about the mind than I have in 20 years of psychotherapy." And that includes all of his schooling. In other words, he took plant medicine in 4 hours. He learned more than he did throughout all of his school. I mean, and he's not the only one. I mean, there are thousands of people today that say, I know psychiatrists and psychologists and social workers who have burned their licenses, given up all the schooling that they did because they know it doesn't work. I've been to school with therapists and clinicians who have said, I'm here because I know that what I do doesn't work. They know it. This isn't a secret, but it's hard for people to accept and even admit when they've got hundreds of thousands of dollars invested in their education, decades of school under their belt, all of this stuff. It's not like it's useless, but it shouldn't be the framework, which is what it is. It's like, hey, if it doesn't fall within this, it's not safe. It's like, please go to the VA and see if they're, you know what I mean? They know. Everyone knows. It's so weird.
I think one of the saddest things that I've heard from several veterans, especially when they come out and they're dealing with the mental health aspect and combining that with the physical pain. Mm-hmm. And the very simple answer is, let's get you on this cocktail of meds. Mm-hmm. And instead of, we're going to put you on this one, how does it make you feel? Well, it's got these impacts. Instead of pulling you off that one and maybe trying something else, well, add this one to it because this is going to counter and pretty soon before you know it, you're 15 counteractive medications instead of just going, all right, let's pull you back off. Let's figure out how we can help you with the least amount of medication possible.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can't speak for where these individual clinicians are coming from. I can't imagine, the Rubik's Cube of trying to help somebody who's bipolar and schizophrenic and all this stuff. Like, I have all the love to them, genuinely, all the love to you guys, man. They're doing their best. They are doing their best. I can't imagine what the chemistry, I didn't even make it past algebra. So let's get serious right there real quick. And we know it doesn't work. And we know it doesn't work. And people are dying anyway. Everyone is doing their best. And there's a better way. And it just drives me batshit crazy knowing that we know that there's a better way. Psychedelics are not new. Humans have been doing studies on the mental health effects of psychedelics since the 40s. And it's overwhelmingly evident, overwhelmingly. And for all the political reasons, for all the monetary reasons and all the stuff, it's just like, nope, that doesn't exist. This is bad. They faked studies on LSD using, what was it, methamphetamines. It was like, this is what LSD does to the brain. It's like, no, that's what methamphetamines do to the brain. They're two different things. But they wanted to scare. It was attack. It was all part of it, you know. It's just,
well, and not to overgeneralize it, I think that that's the carryover that's still lingering today is the perception of the 60s psychedelics.
Mm-hmm. We're in California, and because of where I hang out and the groups and the people that I'm with, I feel like this is normal conversation. But the moment I extend past my bubble, in California, people are like, oh, what are you, some druggie? What are you, some, like, literally the opposite. No, while they're drinking their beer kind of thing. It's just like there's no judgment, because it really isn't. Because how could you know when you don't, how could you? There's just no knowing without this experience. If somebody would have told me what some of the words that I'm saying on this podcast before I did it, it wouldn't mean anything to me. It just has to be experienced. And okay, all right. And it's scary for some people, because some people anchor to things like religion or our cultural expectations and standards as, this is my safe space. And it just prevents them from learning. It prevents them from growing. It prevents them from healing. It prevents them from doing all these things, because they just refuse to let go of this thing, because they're deathly afraid what could be on the other side. You know, doubting, for example, or something, which can be really scary for people. And what they don't know is that they're clutching onto this buoy that's floating in the middle of the ocean that's not anchored to anything anyway. And just let go and listen. And that is actual power. And they think that they're being strong. I'm a strong faith person, so that I'm somebody who's upstanding in the community, because my faith is unshakable. And it's you're like, hey, man, you know, imagine if you were in a place where you could question everything and just listen instead of judge. There's nothing stronger than that. There is nothing stronger than asking questions and being curious. It's much more difficult to be truly curious than it is to be like, I know this. Because that's protection. People don't understand that that's fear, and that's self-preservation when they say, I know this, when they don't know. No judgment. They're just trying to protect themselves. And it's a lot harder to protect yourself when curiosity. And that's why that is a place of strength. Because I don't care what I learn. I don't care what I experience. I just want to experience what is. That is strength. That is like a deep, deep level of courage that people who are attached to knowing, or the illusion of knowing, will never know unless they let go.
Along those same lines, so many of us come up in these careers. We start at a very young age. This is all we know. And the absolute last thing we ever want to do is show our self-weakness. Anything where we appear, even if it's just in our mind, that we might appear weak to somebody else. I would imagine for a lot of men and women, there's a huge amount of just fear of opening yourself. You even mentioned, man, I did all this stuff. Oh, wait a minute. Part of the easiest thing to do would just be look inside. That's got to be a huge amount of fear. And then when you combine it with the perception of, wait a minute, you're going to ask me to take some drugs, which is going to even take more of my control away. And now you're going to allow me to see what's inside me. Because it's not that by taking the drugs, something is getting put in you per se. You're just taking down the walls that let your brain and your soul show you what your demons are.
Yeah. What is, or your unresolved relationship, because these are not demons these are things that we're creating. These demons that you are experiencing, you are the one who's creating them, and nothing else, and no one else. That's crazy for some people. Wait a minute. Are you trying to say, it could be infuriating. I'm not creating this. Are you, I so hear you. When I realized that the problems that I was having with my older brother all lied in my head, I was pissed off because he beat the shit out of me all the time. Well, maybe not. We'll edit that out. But he did things to me, starting from the day I got home from the hospital. I'm like, what do you mean it's my fault? What do you mean this is me? But it wasn't. I had yet to learn this whole idea of fault, that it's nobody's fault. It was a fear response for him, losing this idea that he was the one and only child. And that may sound like a little thing to people, but that was like his whole survival thing, was he was the only thing that mattered in the family. And then I come in, and now all of a sudden he's 3 years old and I'm this little newborn, and where'd all my love go?
Away from me. And
it's not a little thing, and it's not a bratty thing. It's not a pesky, it's everything. So I told, because he didn't know how to handle that, and, mom left and all this stuff, and he was doing the best he could, trying to raise a brother he never wanted in the first place and all this stuff. I realized that, so my brother moved out of the house when I was 16, and I maybe saw him once or twice a year, maybe after that, all the way into my 40s. And so over the span of his life, let's say my brother messed with me 100,000 times. In my mind, he messed with me about every 4 or 5 hours. And the mind, attaching to a thought, the mind doesn't understand the difference between reality and illusion, because these thoughts would be so real and they would be so emotionally provocative that in my mind, my brother was nonstop over the course of 40 years messing with me. And it's not his fault. I was the one who was rerunning those memories. I was thinking of things that never happened. If he was here, this is what he would do. If he was here, this is what he would say. I was creating all this stuff, and I was holding him accountable for all of this. Yes, he did all those things, but the percentage of the impact and influence that he had on my life was microscopic compared to the presence that I created him having in my, so it was like this vicious cycle. And the same thing for my dad, and the same thing, all this stuff. I was the one who was creating it all, and being checked at the door of, it's not him, it's you. That was infuriating, because I felt my whole life that this guy was just relentless. He was relentless because it was in my mind. Once I got past the anger and the resistance, and I felt like a pouting kid almost. I was like in a psychedelic state, pounding my fist on the ground. Like, how dare you say this is my fault? You know what he did to me? It's like, yeah, keep coming. Yeah. Okay. Oh shit. I'm the one who's doing this. And that moment was the biggest hurdle. It wasn't done by any means, but it was the biggest hurdle of my life to overcome in order to get to the place in the relationship that I have with my brother today, which is, you wouldn't recognize it. There's no weight when he and I are together. It's just light. And I'm telling you, that was the biggest mountain of my life that I ever had to climb. And my biggest monster and my biggest, all this stuff now, it doesn't matter. And the only way that I could get there is when I knew that I had to take ownership of what I was creating, which is what? Yeah. And it's hard for people to hear that. Hey, man, yes, this happened, and this is also happening, and there must be ownership. It's hard.
Well, and that's I'll call it the punishment of immaturity, because so much happened to you when you were a very young boy that in the sense of your mind, it's happening in tenfold, because you've got nothing else to compare it against. Mm-hmm. And then as you get older, that's just ingrained in your mind, and it just keeps dragging on with you. It's not until we're older in life, we're more mature, that we are exposed to situations where we're able to then go, oh, wait a minute. And let me look at this picture from a different angle, whether it be through psychedelics, anybody who's gone just through a therapy session, and talking to somebody who asks the right question, who puts you in the right scenario to reevaluate that ingrained anchor, like you referred to, or buoy of what you think life is. And that's a hard thing for a lot of people to do, is to look back at that picture from that different angle and go, oh, wait a minute, I've been painting this picture. I'm not saying wrong, but I've just been painting it from the wrong angle my entire life.
The hard thing about that is, if that is being done with a thinking mind or figuring it out, remember that it is the thinking mind that was creating all of this to begin with. In other words, it's not really possible, to my awareness, to use the thinking mind to observe what the thinking mind is doing. It's not a mirror. There's a notionally a mirror, and in your mind of, like, for example, you can say time doesn't exist the way we think it does. All of time is happening all at once, all the time. You can be like, okay, I can hear those words and that makes sense to me. So, okay, everything is happening all at once. It is quite another experience to experience all of time happening all at once. These are not things that can be thought of. They can be made to feel better with some perspective from talk therapy and all that stuff. This stuff clearly helps. Simply holding space is one of the most powerful medicines we have. But it's a whole nother experience when you are removed from your thinking mind and you are in the space of the observer. And being the observer and just watching this character of the self, then you're like, oh, okay. And you're using the same words. That's what's so hard about healing. Because I can ask a 3-year-old, hey, what is it to be? And they'll give me an answer. And I can ask that same kid when they're 15, hey, what is it to be? And they'll give me a different answer. And when they're 60, they'll give me a different answer. And each one of those times I ask them that question, they're going to be feeling like they're giving me the correct answer from their basis of understanding. There are other levels of understanding. Our best attempt at words that we have in the English language for things that cannot be understood, not deeply with thinking. They just can't be known. And that's very, very, very hard for someone. What do you mean? Hold on a second. And I don't blame them, because I'd say the same thing. Until you don't need psychedelics to do this. There's holotropic breathing. There's, meditate for 20 or 30 years, all the things. There's near-death experiences. There's all kinds of things. You're like, oh, this is forgiveness. I thought I forgave my brother when I was 22. And you couldn't have told me otherwise. I know what forgiveness is, and I've forgiven him. He did that, when he was 8, when he was 15, when he was 20. No clue until I experienced the state of forgiveness. Letting go. Hey man, just let that shit go. Hell yeah. Just let that shit go. It doesn't matter. Just set it down, walk away. Cool, done. And then you can be like, oh, this is what letting go is. And you never know until it is deeply in your experience. And that cannot be done with it just can't from the thinking mind.
Any last pieces that we haven't talked about, or any piece of advice that you want to make sure veterans know about? The podcast is about preparing for transition, but you've brought up such an important component that is, regardless of your transition, just get you to the best you can be, however that is.
Yes. Good job. We're done. Have a good time. All right. It's not about transition. It's about how are you, which is different than who are you. People think that the mistake that they made when they were 8 years old is who they are. Or this person showed me their true colors. You know, they responded to this. Who we are never changes. How we are or where we are changes from moment to moment. That's why you are not the sum of what you were when you were 8 years old. And transition is of course it makes all the sense. It's important to understand these things. But focusing on your transition without focusing on the core of who you are. So there's 4 common elements that I know that I seem to experience that are common among everyone who is suffering at all. And one is being disconnected from the self. 2 is not understanding the mind for what it is and what it is not. 3 is not being present. And 4 is not experiencing self-love. You can focus on all the transitional stuff you want. And if you're not focusing on getting deep experience with those 4 fundamental components, I don't care what job you find. I don't care what income you make. It's not even about me caring or not. It will be irrelevant to you one day. It won't be enough. It will not be enough. It can't be enough. If you focus more on the self, and this is not selfish, this is self-full. If you focus more on developing and healing and growing the self, everything falls into place after that. Because everything is energy. And so if your energetic output is a place of love and compassion and acceptance and trust and support and all these things, that your world is going to turn into those things. If your world is based on fear, lack, protection, all this stuff, universe doesn't care. It's not a good boy, bad boy. There's no judgment. There's no nothing. Oh, okay. Your whole life is in fear. Cool. This is what your life is going to be. So if you work on creating the inward environment that you prefer in your external, energy follows energy. Create that inwardly and everything will fall into place. However you want or however you don't want. It's just what is. In other words, you don't have to worry about the job. Find you, fix you, heal you through all the means that you need to, and just see what happens in life.
Thank you for taking your time and sharing your story. I wish you all the best going forward.
I appreciate you, man.
As always, thank you for listening or watching the episode. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to reach out on social media or send me an email. The links are all in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you. Also, if you're not already, please follow the podcast on whatever platform you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe on YouTube. And if you would, please leave me a rating. Ratings do 2 things. You can tell me what I need to fix or improve, and the more ratings also gets the podcast recommended to more people. Another ask, please share the podcast with anyone you think could benefit from and enjoy it. And last, don't forget, sign up for the newsletter.